Okay, we've just wrapped our second seminar, and I have gotten so many questions. I'm going to go over the entire setup that I'm using to get a multicam live stream broadcast over Zoom for our many clients. So this is going to be very janky camera footage, but the content will actually be good, I think. So right here, we kind of have, I'm just going to get myself out of this and just start pointing the camera. Okay, so right here, we kind of have the brains of the operation. So this is the core component of the stream. It's the Atem Mini Pro. And the Atem Mini Pro, what that allows me to do is to take multiple HDMI inputs in and multiple microphones in, and then be able to send that signal out as either a stream over the Ethernet jack or a webcam source directly into a computer. So I'll literally show you what that wiring looks like there. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 4 HDMI inputs. Then I have 1 HDMI output. That output is right now going to our program monitor where I have the multi-camera display. I have cameras 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, these are the displays for the stream if I was running a stream off of it. And over here I have the graphic queued up. Over here, mic, and then this is the program of what's actually running right now. So back into here, I have the USB out, which then tracks into the computer that's actually going to be running the Zoom conference. Then I have an Ethernet plug going into a Ethernet switch. That Ethernet switch is then going into the Ethernet jack. And I didn't do that initially, but found that the whole production runs much better. Everything is hardwired. So the Ethernet switch is a must, because on the other side of the Ethernet switch, I'm also then going back into the computer that is hosting the meeting. So the Atem is on Ethernet, the computer is on Ethernet, but that also makes the switch discoverable on the network by other computers. So that's kind of handy. So let me turn this off. Okay, so let me talk about then the connection from the Atem to the computer. So we have the USB up here that's then going over here. And then, so right here, I actually just created up a Zoom meeting room, and well, switch cameras here. So all I'm doing to get this, once you plug in the Atem into the computer, it just shows up as a webcam source. So right here, it says Blackmagic Design, 30 frames per second. That's gonna be the one I'm gonna select. So I can show you if it didn't. So if I was just using my FaceTime camera, it's gonna look like that. Hi, right? But then I just am gonna now have this option for Blackmagic, 30 frames a second. Now I have my multicam video. Okay. Then sound, I'm pulling, select a microphone. It's gonna show me Blackmagic Design, and that is now pulling the sound mix off of right there. So I guess we'll transition there. Let's talk about what I am actually plugging in to the Atem. So first I have 1, 2, 3 different cameras. Camera 1 is over there, well, it's all the way over there, doing a whiteboard shot. Camera 3, if that sees there, is right over there, giving me the logo shot. And then camera 4 is up there, giving me a top GoPro shot. So I skipped over camera 2, because what camera 2 is actually is a computer. And so that computer is plugged straight in as an HDMI source. This is actually an old MacBook Pro 15-inch, which actually still has an HDMI jack. So I just go HDMI, HDMI right there. And then whatever I put on this screen acts as a video source. So if I want to do a video as pre-roll or something, cool, I can just do that. All right, so let's then talk about sound. So sound, I have 2 different speakers. So what I'm using is 2 different Sennheiser mics. I have a AVX Then I have an old, I don't know what this is. I don't even know what the number of this is, but it's the Sennheiser mic. Each one of those goes into one of the 2 mic jacks, and then I can control them by just hitting those buttons right there. So it's on, it's off, off. And I can always see here on the mixer what's going on. So there's 2 channels that are grayed out all the way on the right because they're both off. Now they're both on, but they just have no signal because no one's plugged into those microphones right now. Oops, okay. We'll talk more about like settings and stuff and the Atem software at the end of this. I'll go over all the hardware now. What else is on the hardware side? So let's go the different cameras I'm using. We'll do the simple one first. We have just a GoPro with a wide shot. Over here, I have a Z6 on a tripod. And then this is gonna be the fancy one over here. I have A6400 on a Ronin S, and the way I'm getting this signal is through the Hollyland 300 HDMI transmitter with a gigantic battery on it. I also am powering the A6400 so I don't have to keep doing battery swaps through this cable that then plugs into a dummy battery over here and plugs right into the Ronin battery right there. So that way, I'm now able to put this camera completely independent, and it's sending out an HDMI signal. But if I'm doing like whiteboard, I can set that very simply. Or if I'm needing to walk around a little bit, I now have a completely untethered camera that is running HDMI right into the board, which is awesome, which is very awesome. But because it's also on the Ronin S, I can just plop it down whenever I want. I found these transmitters fantastic. I've only had 1 signal loss in like 5 different streams. And I think that was because I had a lot of stuff blocking the receiver. So the way I'm getting that source in is the receiver is right here, has an HDMI out on it. That HDMI out goes right into, what is that, camera 1? And that's camera 1 right here. And camera 1 right here. Okay? So that's pretty fancy. I'm a big fan of that. So the Z6, and then I've also used some other cameras. I just don't have them plugged in right now. Those are being hardwired. Got our HDMI connection right into it, and then wire, long wire, and that is our camera 3 source. What else? So this is also a very good time to learn about one of the biggest challenges I've had is cable and power management. So this entire setup is super duper power hungry. I have every one of the cameras needs a dedicated power supply to keep it running without having to swap batteries. Every camera also then needs to have a wire or a transmitter that's then running back into the board. So that's right now 1 HDMI cable, 2 HDMI cables, then a 3rd HDMI cable for the computer, then another HDMI cable to get from the monitor to the board. But then you start developing the real fun with HDMI. Is almost every camera is using a different HDMI standard. So the GoPro is using a micro HDMI. The Z6 is using a mini HDMI. So instead of buying a bunch of different cables, what I have is a bunch of different adapters. So these kinds of adapters, where is it? There it is. So, right? So I have a bunch of adapters, and I also had to buy a bunch of different adapters of the same type, because what happened is some of them, like the one specifically designed for the GoPro, didn't fit because of the housing. So the adapter itself fits, but with the housing on it wouldn't fit. So more trips to Amazon, had to buy all sorts of different wires. But then you can also see here, just to power this station, I have 3 different surge protectors, plus the plug in the wall. You know, each one of these computers needs power, the Atem needs power, the monitor needs power. I need power for the transmitter here. I need charging stations for extra batteries for the microphones. And it's just absolute power chaos, and just wires. There's just wires everywhere. Again, then also this. The LAN switch needs power too, and then I have 3 different LAN cables going through that. And then, because Apple is evil, I'm using a 2017 MacBook Pro, which means it's USB-C. So I need adapters then to get USB-C to Ethernet over here. And then I also was playing around with some USB-C to HDMI output cables and all sorts of other things. What else are we at? Another big technical hurdle we had to overcome is because one of the real reasons people like to use Zoom, even though it looks horrible, is the interaction component. People want to be able to actually talk to people. And again, if we're replacing live seminars with remote seminars, you don't want to just be doing a YouTube live or a Facebook live because the interaction level is very small. It's just going to be text comments, and that just really changes up the game of how it works. So our solution has been to get a gigantic TV that's going to show the Zoom meeting. Like right now, I can't really show what it looks like. I'll put up some B-roll from the meeting itself, the seminar itself that we just did. But what I'm able to do here is just mirror whatever is on the Zoom computer that's running this onto this TV. And the way I'm doing that is through AirPlay. This is a newer Samsung TV with one click, in theory, one click on the computer. I'm just doing an AirPlay to the Samsung 6 and mirroring whatever is on my screen. So if I was over here, I'm doing my presentation, right? I'm standing here. What I'm gonna see on that screen though is all the Zoom attendees in the meeting in gallery view, okay? The big challenge that a presenter has to remember though is to not look here, but make sure their eye line stays with the camera. So that comes down to then just setting the stage right, to making sure cameras and monitors have good eye lines. We also worked with AirPods a few times, but the biggest problem with the AirPods is you kind of have the voice of God too much, and the other people in the room, if they don't have AirPods on as well, they have no idea what's going on in the meeting and where things are. With this TV, I'm actually using this as the speaker for the Zoom meeting. So all the audio coming out of the Zoom meeting is now going to be piped through this. All our audio is going to go into the Atem. That was a confusing way of saying that. Okay, what are other things before we get into the computer? Okay, so something else that you have to do, because I've not really talked at all about actual camera setup, I'm just kind of pointing them. I obviously come from a background of shooting events and recording things. None of these cameras are recording. They don't even have memory cards in them. What's happening is it just takes the clean HDMI source and puts it in. What that means though, is you can't grade the footage. So you have to make sure that the live view picture is exactly what you want. So whereas normally I'd be shooting in a very flat color profile, both of the cameras now have to be set with a profile that's way punchier, way more colored, and also making sure the white balance is matching in both cameras so there's not huge discrepancies there. What was the other thing? Also, just have to remember frame rate stuff. Like you have to go 1080 by 30 frames per second on each camera, set the appropriate shutter speed. Like those are not settings I normally would be using. I'd normally either be in 4K or I'd be shooting slow-mo, or each camera would have its own thing, and I never shoot in 30. So just remembering to set those things consistently across the cameras makes a big difference. The Atem will fix the signal if you didn't do that, but it's just better to set it right in the camera. And also the Holylands won't transmit 4K, so you have to make sure that that's fixed right. I think I've gone over, like, oh, obviously, there's a big Dracast LED 100, 1000, I think it's 1000. And that I'm just kind of spinning back and forth. For this seminar, we used 2 to 3 different sets. We used a whiteboard set that the Ronin covered over there. Then we used kind of the logo set over here. Sometimes, I say it was sort of 2 or 3, because sometimes it was standing, sometimes it was seated. The seated set, the only difference was obviously we needed to bring in chairs and lower camera, which makes a big difference. But for the viewer, it's a completely different set. Like obviously the logo's still there, but when you get that quick transition from, like right now, it's still kind of set in, I'll pull it up on the program. So right there, boom. You know, only one of the chairs is in right now, but it looks very, very different. And so that's something I'm definitely learning more about, just to kind of figure out how the whole thing works. So let's get into the Atem software control a little bit and what's going on there. So the Zoom meeting is up here. The only things you really need to think about managing here is pinning the video so that other speakers don't have the screen grabbing, because you put in all this work into making this look really good. You don't want some random guys like under chin taking over the screen. So pin your video. The other thing is also making sure in the preferences, boom, preferences, video, you better make sure you hit enable HD. What does that do? Enable HD, because if you don't, there's a very strong chance you're sending this really, really good 1080 video source into Zoom, and then Zoom is just compressing it down to complete garbage. Like, Zoom is already going to compress it a lot, so you want to make sure you're giving yourself every opportunity to make sure it looks good. Let's jump into what I'm actually doing on the switcher a little bit. Where is it? I don't know why it's closed. There it is. Oh, that's not very good. Why it's closed? No switcher. That's embarrassing. There it is. Okay, so this is the switcher, which for the most part I'm able to stay out of during the stream, because most of the switching I'm going to manually do. Like if I need to turn a mic on and change camera, I'm just going to kind of preset myself and to make sure I can just kind of do it, you know, so on, right? Changing stuff around. Super duper. One technical hurdle I realized pretty quickly, the audio will have a delay in it if you're using the mic channels instead of the camera audio channels. But in their latest update, they were very nice and they fixed that. So if you go into audio, mic 2, mic 1 right here, there's then this little menu right over here for the audio delay. For both of them, I have it cranked to 8, and I did some tests and it seemed to work. Also, something you have to do if you're going to be using lav mics like me is make sure you're setting those for line inputs, which is, I don't know, it's somewhere in here. You gotta just, maybe it's the settings, it's over here. Audio, general, yeah. So analog audio inputs, I have to switch them both to microphone so the signal comes in right. I should probably click that too, that'd be good. Okay, I don't know if there's anything else in there. I never know what half of these things mean. But so with the audio delay set, it'll sync up the mics to the video feed properly. If you don't do that, there's going to be a noticeable delay between the mouth movement and the actual sound. The reason I have the mics on independent channels instead of on the cameras, because you can have, like, let's say camera 1 on, but microphone channel 3 on. You can do that. The problem that will happen though is if for some reason you need to power down a camera and change a battery or redo a cable run or move something when the presentation's actually on, you are now killing that audio source. Whereas if I have them running just directly into the mic channels, not mounted through a camera, I can much more easily manage the mics and the cameras separately, which is good. But in theory though, you could be running, without adding anything extra to this board, you could run 6 different mic channels, just as long as you just remember which camera has which person's microphone, and you could play around all sorts of ways with that. So that's pretty cool. Other big things is just make sure this transition is on. Instead of the hard cut button, put the auto transition on, and that'll give you that like smooth fade between two, right? You see a little fade, whereas if it's on cut, it just does hard cut. But those are the little things I've been finding to jazz it up a little bit. All right, what was the other thing here? Oh, and then the other thing was just figuring out how graphics work. I know I don't understand what upstream and downstream keys are at all, but I know that if I load this thing up with pictures, like lower thirds, big graphics, holding graphics, and all that stuff, and then I load the appropriate thing into the media player, and then I hit this one that says on air, it puts it up there. Then there's like some settings in here that you got to mess around with. Something called pre-multiplied keys. I don't really know what that means. I watched a tutorial, but I got them to the point where they work and they show up. Like you can see it right there, right? You see that little lower third? Cool, it's on. But I could just as easily change that to something like a big logo if I then hit the black button, right? And that looks real pretty. Cool. So that's kind of how I was manipulating some of those big graphics and the lower third. But what I've also discovered in doing this is that it's really beneficial to have an extra computer plugged in. For instance, I can use, like if we look at our camera 2 source right now, it's a black screen, but if I have a video playing on loop, I could use that as pre-roll in the background, or I could just as easily make like a really simple logo graphic that kind of animates like this, right? And then I could use that as a camera source. And so like, let's say they were over here on camera 3, they were doing their thing, I leave the lower third on, and then I'm like, okay guys, we're gonna cut there, and now go to like a nice logo shot, right? That's now cutting to camera 2, which is just a video playing on loop, right? And I think that's been working out pretty cool. Yeah, let me see. I don't know. I don't really know if I got anything else here. So yeah, like if you add all this stuff up, it's a lot of money, but like the cool thing about this setup is that I didn't actually spend very much money here. All of this stuff, for the most part, has been accumulated over time. That's why I'm using different cameras. Like I have a Nikon here and a Sony there and a GoPro there, and I have different models of Sonys, and you can plug and play endlessly with cameras as long as you have a clean HDMI out source. So you can use very, very, very cheap cameras because you're really not asking them to do very much. You're not even asking them to record. They just need to be powered, and they need to give you a clean 1080 by 30 signal, which is something cameras maybe 10 years ago could do. So you could buy a bunch of very cheap cameras and kind of populate multiple sources. But I have a pretty good hunch, if you're watching this, you have a camera or two already. So it's very easy to kind of mix and match the cameras into the HDMI feed because the mixer sorts out all the weird, complicated stuff that I don't understand. What's also nice is because my computer is an absolute piece of shit right now, the Atem does all the hardware processing it needs to do and then is just sending out a signal. So if you were doing a Facebook or a YouTube stream, you don't actually even need to plug it into the computer. You just go to this switcher output and you just type in a network key or whatever it's called, the key for Facebook or for YouTube or whatever. And as long as everything is wired to the Ethernet, you don't need the Atem plugged into your computer. It will completely run the stream on its own. And what that means is your computer is now using absolutely no resources. So you're able to then do more stuff, which is pretty cool. But even then, you know, pushing the webcam stream right into the Zoom conference is great because, again, it doesn't put any real stress on my computer and works great. Oh, and if you want to see here, this is where the AirPlay thing is. So all that happens is if you have a TV that is AirPlay compatible, you're just going to have options here to throw that up there. That's something that's had one hiccup in 4 live streams, and I have no way of solving why the hiccup happened. It just, the signal cut out. The only problem with the signal cutting out is that it's very distracting for the hosts because they don't understand what's going on, but the Zoom conference itself is still running. The mic is still there, the video is still there. The only distraction is using that TV as a monitor. They might get confused and think that the signal is out. So just keeping the hosts on kind of schedule and understanding what's going on. It's sort of important. Yeah, I think that's gonna wrap up this video. How to get a multi-camera live stream up onto Zoom, how to get everyone involved, how to get everyone hearing, seeing, and trying to make this thing work. So, cool, check it out. Bye.